Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Burton, class of 2008. I have the honor and privilege of serving as co-chair for DBAN. And I just want to welcome you to tonight's program. Very excited for this second in our virtual masterclass series. Tonight we'll be hearing from Wes Hart, class of 1998, on building resistance for anyone carrying the weight of the world. Wes is a coach, a civil rights attorney, and founder of Abiri Consulting LLC. Tonight's talk will be providing a framework for building resilience and tools for immediate practice. So without further ado, Wes Hart.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate that introduction. Also appreciate the um, amazing first installment of this series that you did last month. That was really a powerful word about handling grief, and I would appreciate um, what you offered. So, as uh, as Chris said, I'm a civil rights attorney. I was with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division for 16 years and left recently. And also accompany me on this call, on this webinar. You might get some in the Q&A or the chat. You might get some responses from Dr. Eduardo Haynes. He's a friend and colleague. We're both from Mooresville, North Carolina, if you can believe it, 10 miles from Davidson, but we're in different places now. And he's a business readiness expert and professor. So hopefully, um, we'll be able to answer some questions and provide something that's useful for you today. And before we start the slides, which we'll do in just a second, just wanted to say that, that we recognize that people are carrying a lot right now. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar was to give some tools for folks to kind of uh, be able to do some small things towards building resilience. And I'm primarily going to focus on individual resilience, but there are also some applications for some of the concepts and frameworks that we talk about today for team resilience. Chris had mentioned that I'm a coach and also an organizational development consultant, and this is, a lot of these applications, because organizations are basically, they are made up of individuals. So when you can address individual challenges and solutions, there's often a way to use those tools in a larger context to address an organization or a team. All right. And also, while we're going through these slides, I'm going to give a brief description for anyone who might be visually impaired or listening on the phone. I'll give a brief description of what the slide is. So the opening slide is basically a picture of the allegorical um, Lady Justice blindfolded. And the title of our presentation is Building Resilience. But before we start, I know that I'm not sure how many people are on the call, but if you could, if you want, if you could just kind of say where you're calling in from, um, give some greetings to your fellow D-banners. We're all family. We want this presentation to be more of a conversation. And if there's anything that comes up during the course of the slides or the presentation that kind of resonates with you, you know, kind of give us some love in the chat and say that resonates. And or if there's something that you disagree with, you can give me a soft pushback in the chat. But we want this to kind of be a conversation because there's a lot of wisdom in DBAN, and DBAN spans very lots of generations. And what we need to do is we need to rely on each other, especially in times like these, to kind of get knowledge and wisdom, um, so that we can help ourselves and the next generation kind of move forward into spaces that are safer and and more fulfilling, and just support each other as like family. Okay, so this slide is a slide um, with a picture, a photo of a black and white photo of people holding civil rights um, signs in a civil rights protest movement. And what we'll explore during the course of this presentation is basically threefold. One is uh, we're exploring the importance of pausing, and I want to thank you all who are here for pausing with us today, because pausing is the first foundational step to building resilience. And it doesn't matter how much you're able to pause. Sometimes a pause is 5 minutes, sometimes it will be an hour, but it's important that we create that space for ourselves. Sometimes you have to take that space, and we're going to talk about boundaries a little bit later, and not expect someone to just give it to you. So if you can carve out 5 minutes here or there, 30 minutes, an hour, you know, and use this framework to explore resilience and the foundations of resilience, I'm hopeful that it'll you'll be able to make some positive changes. So first is making that space. The next thing that we're going to explore in this conversation is information about what resilience is and what it is not, because there are some ideas out there about what resilience is, and about, some people think they're not resilient when it's not a character trait. These are the resilience, and we'll talk about it in the definition. It's a skill set, it's a process, and there are components of it that you can kind of activate in very small chunks. So, in going over that, I'll explain what resilience really means, a systems approach to resilience, because we all are a part of and systems, and there are also systems within us. So we'll talk about resilience, both internal and external systems, and hopefully that provides a helpful framework for you. Then I'll talk about the stabilizing anchors. You can see with those three A's that it's going to be a three-part um, anchor kind of framework. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, I'm going to talk about some restorative practices. And by the time you leave this presentation today, we hope that you will be able to commit to doing one or two of these things, either later tonight or tomorrow, or in the next week. Just doing some of these small things so you can just start on that path to building your resilience more. I recognize that this is, it's late in the day, so I'm, you know, I'm going to try not to bore you too much. And I know that you might be squeezing time in between putting the kids to bed or even going back to work. Uh, so engage. Let's engage on the chats. And this is beautiful. People are just kind of chiming in and talking. Wow, we got folks from Germany and Atlanta. That's just great. And folks are going to connect. So we hopefully, you know, this DBAN series, thanks Chris for putting this into play. We want this to be a space that's safe for us where we can connect and build. All right, next slide. So why this matters now. There have been a lot of big shifts in the last year or so, lots of uncertainty, lots of injustice, chronic urgency, emotional toll that it's taking on a lot of our bodies and spirits. And so that's why this is important for us to kind of recognize that there are things that we can do to uh, build our resilience. And this slide is showing a picture of a pink poppy growing out of a crack between asphalt and concrete. So it's just kind of showing this beauty that can come out of hard places. Um, Now, before we go much further, I do want to check in with folks. If you're comfortable, uh, there's in the chat, how are you showing up today? Like, is there a feeling that's, if you're willing to share, like, how do you feel? How are you feeling right now? Um, just one word or two words, how are you feeling? or what do you hope to gain out of this conversation today? Um, if y'all could put some things in the chat. I know we're all experiencing a lot. No one person has the answers. I talked about the wisdom that's in this group, and we can use the chat function as a way to kind of get that wisdom out there. Janet, thank you for putting that in there. Yeah, it's definitely um, yeah. There's people are experiencing a lot of stress, and I've noticed that in my coaching practice. This stress is everywhere. Um, yeah, yeah. Okay. Janet, thank you for Janet for those ready to expatriate. Yeah, it's heavy. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. Now, what I do want to point out now is, just in that one act of saying, I feel such and such, I feel angry, I feel stress, I feel fear. Even when you engage in that one small act, you have engaged the brain's like regulatory circuits to help reduce reactivity and improve clarity. And this is something that you may not notice it now. If you noticed a change, let me know. But it's scientifically proven that when you take one of these small little seeds, this buzz that's all around you, when you take it and you name it, it can help you to feel more in control, even if it's like a teeny tiny little bit of control. And and when you can name something, and this is also something that we do in our coaching practices. Chris is also a coach, and we take whatever it is that emerges from that first question. Say we're if you said you were fearful, then you ask a lot of other questions after that. Like, how is that fear? Have you allowed yourself to feel that space, that fear? If not, how is that fear showing up in your life? Is it affecting other parts of your life? What would it look like if you created space to feel fear or whatever emotion you're dealing with? What would it look like for you to claim your own agency in dealing with that emotion? Not that we can always do that um, uh, for every emotion, but if we're going to address an emotion um, or that's affecting us, naming that emotion and then naming how it's affecting us physically or in our workspaces is important for us to get further down the path to solutions. So awareness is the first step, even if it's a small seed. And I'll go through that kind of path of from awareness through to action in the framework that we talk about in a little bit. All right. When you hear the word resilience, um, and thank you for all the feelings that folks mentioned here, exhaustion, um, fear, and this is community is important. And I'll mention that a little bit later. But yeah, thank you for sharing and being open and creating. This is hopefully a safe space for everyone. Want you to feel safe, and to the extent that you are in a leadership position or can affect other spaces, creating safety in those spaces um for people, especially, for folks who are in, who look like us. It's important. Um, so when you hear the word resilience, can y'all give me some feedback? Like what comes to mind when I say, I want to be resilient or that person is resilient? What are you thinking? Is it someone who is I think that what typically comes up is folks think of this tough image of people um, who are just tough enough to withstand pressures. Um, Chris, thank you for saying that. Think of someone who bends but doesn't break. Okay, I see that. Janet, that's a it says a word that's triggering. It's a in some I'd like to explore more about that, but I can see how that is the case. Innovation, standing your ground. Yes, yes. Tenacity, not toughness. Yeah. And this is it's yeah, there's a lot around that word because I think in a lot of our experiences, um, we've been forced into situations where we have to demonstrate or yeah, I can understand. I'll respond to that later, but it is a triggering kind of word because it brings back all the things that we've been through and have been forced to go through, perhaps. So this is the definition of resilience from the American Psychological Association. And I'll just read it briefly. I'm not going to read most of these slides, but the definition says the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Psychological research demonstrates that the resources and skills associated with more positive adaptation can be cultivated and practiced. And unfortunately, there is a lot of people that people have had to carry, especially people of color. I mean, the expectation that you have to carry that is an injustice. Um, and these situations that we put in, that we are forced into, uh, I don't have to describe all of that, but it's important for us to create safe spaces where we can let this know, we can talk to each other um, and about how we're dealing with things. So what I want you to take away from this conversation today is that resilience is a dynamic process, and it's about positive adaptation in adversity. I know there are a lot of people on this call who could teach this. Resilience is not about toughness or stoicism. It's about flexibility. And part of the injustice is in forcing some people to be too flexible or expecting people to be too flexible or to carry a whole lot. But psychological flexibility, which is supported by restorative acts like what we're doing today, um, and recovery are a stronger predictor of well-being than just endurance alone. Like if someone it's not just about being tough. It's about adapting to circumstances and incorporating recovery and restorative acts. And one of the things that I had meant to mention earlier is that resilience it looks different to different people. There's no one people we shouldn't compare ourselves to anyone else, on some kind of scale of resilience. Um, I one of my idols is John Lewis, and when I think back to the civil rights movement and read those histories and things that they went through, um, and how folks were basically beaten uh, almost to death and then got up and continued fighting. But we shouldn't compare ourselves to the situations that other people are in because resilience looks different for each of us. We all have our own things that we're carrying. So let's not judge ourselves at all. But one thing that I did note from the civil rights movement, as far as restorative acts, when I was reading John Lewis's autobiography, one of the things he talked about was, when SNCC had some particularly hard days, one of the things that they were required to do was to gather and and kind of let things out amongst themselves and to sing and to dance and to have like this these these restorative kind of restorative moments where in community we could support each other's resilience. So a lesson from the civil rights movement, something that we should try to replicate now to the extent that we can. All right. Any comments so far about this? Anything resonating or anything questionable? All right, folks. Thank you so much for being here. I'm appreciative of this. And this is all just a picture of a short, rustic wooden pier extending into a calm lake surrounded by lush hills. So this is basically what I just said. Resilience is adaptability and restoration, and it's staying aligned with your purpose. Because when there's dissonance between what you're doing and what your values are and your purpose is, that can also contribute to more stress. And I know a lot of you on the call have we experience that kind of dissonance sometimes daily, but it's good to when we name it, then there might be ways that we can address things. So thanks, Bianca, for seeing that things are resonating. All right, so we've defined resilience. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Resilience is believing in yourself. Yes, definitely. And we'll talk about that in these three anchors: alignment and agency. Just to preview, the anchors are awareness, alignment, and agency. And we've kind of been talking about awareness. Alignment is just, making sure that your values or whatever, that your values are consistent, and you are believing in yourself. And that should be one of the top values. I am important. I am competent. I am, beautiful as I am. And just, no matter what people are saying around you, the stuff that you got to put up with at work, these are, having those values and believing in yourself and making sure that you're not undermining that value of yourself, is important for resilience. All right. So next one, I talked about internal systems and external systems. So internal system, and we just got off of the resilience slide, the definition, and we talked about psychological flexibility. And when we talk about internal systems, you see on this slide mindset and beliefs, emotional regulation, energy and nervous system rhythms. That could also involves like your physical body. Getting sleep is extremely important. Eating well is part of this. And then values and motivations. That's kind of part of what uh, Michelle had touched on. And you'll see a link where Ed just posted a great book that I recommend to everyone, by Valerie Burton. It's called Rules of Resilience. It came out last year. Well, she goes through, and I think she has 10 rules and goes into detail. She's a coach, a psychologist. I'm not a healthcare professional or a therapist. I think I made y'all know that, but that book, if you're looking for something that can really that might really connect with you on this topic, I'd look out for her, Valerie Burton, Rules of Resilience. So internal systems. These are very important, right? And this is internal systems are the things that we can exert some control over. I mean, sometimes it's a battle within ourselves, and it helps to get other support externally, if that is the case. But internal systems are the things that we are most capable in most circumstances of having some kind of influence over. And I'm talking about personal resilience, but that's only part of the picture. we're all part of other systems inside and outside of ourselves. So the next slide is about the external systems. External systems like team dynamics and workplace culture, organizational policies and norms, community networks and resources, social, political, or justice systems. I can tell you from my own experience um, that um, dealing with external systems was something that I did as a job, and it became very frustrating for me because I'm in the work and I'm trying um, to promote justice and equality and human dignity. But you meet people and systems that no matter how hard you try, you are not going to be able to turn that system into a just system. And I tell you, I burned out because I was trying so hard to change these things in many different situations, and I over-identified with certain outcomes. And we'll talk about that in a little bit of being able to really identify the things that you have control over, the things that you have influence over, and things that you have neither influence nor control over. So if you're doing a lot of work on efforts that you don't have any to try to change something that you have no influence or control over, um, it's going to become frustrating. And if you can still do the work, I mean, that's what we do. And as civil rights attorneys, we do the work. But when you start to over-identify with an outcome, when your mind is fixated on on a certain result, and then you start to lose hope because you don't see that result in the near term, or you're not able to see it, um, visualize it, then it can really affect you. So what are the things that we can control and influence? Like in that in the civil rights movement with, I told you about John Lewis and SNCC. I mean, there's certain, they controlled their bodies. They controlled the passion within themselves and within their organizations. They controlled whatever they could control. And, ultimately, there were some ways that they made some systemic changes for John Lewis in particular, like over his decades. But we be careful about over identifying with outcomes with these external systems. Um, Need to be realistic about what we can influence. Otherwise, we beat ourselves up emotionally. And also want to flag this for leaders who are on the call to be mindful of that in your workplaces or in your organizations to the extent that you can put things in place that support people um, being able to engage in more restorative practices at work or recovery or naming their emotions or allowing them space to recover. That's important because when you are able to create that space, it really supports full it supports resilience more. Because if an individual's working on their resilience, but then, you know, they're being forced to stay in the office 12 hours a day and they can't take vacations or they can't, you know, um, when there are a lot of these pressures, we have to look out for the health of everyone in these systems that we have. Um, yeah, that's a good comment, Chris. You have thinking about how to couple pragmatism with hope for a better tomorrow. Yeah, and hope is like hope is a choice. And that's a different we won't get into that today, but it's a different topic maybe for another webinar. Like we can cultivate hope and strengthen it as a muscle, uh, so that we can see the possibilities, and it helps to orient our work. Um, so we can, yeah, that's another DBAN webinar that we can get into. All right. So right now, I want y'all to do a little experiment with me. Okay. So I'm going to invite you to take a breath with me, a few breaths. All right. So breath number one, I want you to inhale deeply, hold it, let it go. All right. Again, inhale deeply, hold it, let it go. All right. One last time. Inhale deeply, hold it, let it go. So we identified one small thing you can do, and that's identifying your emotions. Another small restorative practice that you could do is to create time to just breathe and take deep breaths. Science says that when you take a few slow, deep breaths, it actually signals your nervous system that you're safe, and it activates the parasympathetic system. It can lower your heart rate and your blood pressure, um, and bring you into the present moment just in a few minutes. And especially in some of the high pressure work that a lot of y'all are in, this kind of reset helps you to interrupt that stress physiology so that you can respond with more clarity and intention instead of reacting out of tension. So creating that space is important so that we respond rather than just react. Um, so this small thing, taking some breaths can help you in those stressful situations. It's not a solution to all problems, but sometimes it can help. I do it pretty regularly. If I'm going into a hot meeting, or I just have had an experience that was not pleasant. Just having doing these little restorative acts helps, and doing a lot of these little restorative acts over the course of a long period can really help you to recover. All right. Any questions so far? All right, folks. And I've alluded to some of these things already before. Common resilience strains, chronic urgency, moral fatigue, over-identification with outcomes, lack of recovery time. Um, I know that, whenever I was doing cases and, you get off one trial, I was a public defender in Harlem for some years. And, when you get off one trial and you're preparing for the next one and you don't have real time to recover. And back then we didn't really have a system set up in that office that took these things into account. Now, they're doing that more, in that particular office. And Dr. Haynes put another link to another book that I recommend. Um, it's by Jennifer Moss. It's called The Burnout Epidemic. It gives you some really, especially from a workplace perspective, especially if you're a leader in the workplace, or if you want to influence. I mean, thinking back to, areas of influence and control. If you want to influence your workplace, there's some concrete, um, practical technique, step strategies in this book that you might be able uh, to get your workplace to kind of implement. So, in both of these books, Rules of Resilience and The Burnout Epidemic, I like them because they're concrete. I mean, there's some really concrete things that you can do, takeaways, and they're both available on audiobook and uh, in paper, the old-fashioned book. All right. Um, okay. Resilience anchors. I alluded to these a little bit before. Awareness, noticing states like your emotional state, noticing patterns. There might be certain people or things that are are triggering or just noticing those things. When you notice it, then you can like think through it a little bit more and ask more questions, a series of questions to get to possible ways to address it. Alignment, staying connected to your values. Um, Michelle had talked about, really, valuing yourself and not undermining yourself. That's something that's important, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, like keeping your integrity in place, and then agency, acting within your control. If you're, if you're doing a lot of action outside of your control, and I know that there's a certain level of that we have to do as part of our jobs, but in those areas where you do have control, or you have the ability to set up some boundaries, like really think through that, and so that you're acting within your control. All right. So with these three anchors so far, I know we haven't gone into them yet to explain them, but is any of them resonating? Like is anyone like looking at that and thinking, oh yeah, awareness. I'm not, that's something that I feel like I want to do more, or I'm feeling like, yeah, my work, I'm really not aligned, or agency. If you feel like you're spending 80% of your work working on things outside of your control, let me know. Okay. Thanks, Michelle. And also, I forgot to give the um, picture last time. The slide before was a water going down a drain. This is a picture of a small boat, anchored in some clear, looks like Mediterranean water or something. All right. Now, let's get into the anchors themselves. Okay. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. All right. Anchor number one, awareness. Noticing patterns and needs, naming emotions without judgment. When you name these emotions, it's just saying, this is how I feel. You're not putting I should feel this way, or it's bad for me to feel this way. You just name the emotions. Another resource that I have that I find useful, and I've actually used this myself, is a feelings wheel. If I didn't include a link to that here, but there are lots. If you just Google for feelings wheel, or yeah, you there's I forget what the I don't have it in front of me right now, but there's something about when you label a feeling, the specificity of the feeling that you label has like a deeper effect. So when you look at a feelings wheel and you just name the emotion, you know, I it, it's helpful, because sometimes we're feeling things and we don't really have the words to identify, what that particular emotion is. So for awareness, I do recommend like sometimes using a feelings wheel. Um, and I'll find a link to one of the ones that I use is, calm.com. If you look up calm.com feelings wheel, I think that's a good one. There's also there are a variety of feelings wheels. There's some that um uh, more tailored to our community. Um and I saw some other ones there too. But yeah, feelings wheels. Uh, I recommend using those. And like I said, right here, I mentioned a normalized recovery. If we are in workplaces where we normalize recovery, it helps individuals to recover better. And you can use things like this 3-2-1 check-in tool, um, which is something that you can use, in the morning. You can use it before you go to bed tonight. I'm gonna send a link to it. Or figure out how I can put it in this, post it in this thing here. Um, but it's the 3-2-1 is 3 words for how I feel. You can do it at any point. 2 things that I want to release. Like, do you want to release self-judgment? Do you want to release tension? Do you want to, 2 things you want to release, and then one restorative act. And that restorative act could be naming the emotion. I mean, it could be yeah, using a feelings wheel to get more specific about how you name your emotions, or going for a walk, you know, telling a friend that you are grateful for them. There's science that says like acts of gratitude um, also have a restorative effect. You know, tell someone that you're thankful for them. Tell someone that they did a great job on something. Identify, like, make a list of things that you're grateful for. There are a lot of things that that we can do that are restorative acts that aren't really huge lifts. It's just a matter of integrating them, somehow. You can put up a calendar reminder for you to, do it every morning at 7 a.m. or when you're if you do meditation or prayer, or you know put things into your schedule so that you have restorative acts um, more integrated into your daily schedule. And over time, these things can increase your awareness, increase your resilience, help you to navigate complex emotional landscapes with more flexibility and more intentionality. Any questions on awareness or any comments? All right. Now, this is a picture of some aligned statues. I don't know how to describe those statues. Um, but this is about connecting your purpose and your values to how you're showing up and what you're experiencing. What your things that are happening to you, or things that you are doing. It's about that kind of alignment. Alignment is value, behavior, congruence. Working in harmony with your purpose renews your energy. I mean, I can't tell you, but when I left DOJ, it was hard, right? It was, I mean, it was time. I knew it was time for me to leave because I could see that I wasn't going to be able to influence or control any of the stuff that was happening. Um, and then when I came out and I started doing the coaching and consulting practice, um, I could tell I had renewed energy because I was working in harmony with my purpose, which is, to help people become um, more, get from where they are to where they want to be. And I was trying, working hard to do that with civil rights organizations and advocacy groups. And this is the thing, if you're in a workplace, if you're a leader, your leaders who model kind of alignment um, with the values of the organization or the things that they're um, expecting the employees to do, that fosters more um, trust and psychological safety that can lead to more productivity and happier folks. So again, it's very dependent upon the context, but alignment is really important. Setting healthy boundaries, um, revisiting what's yours to carry. If your overextension is misalignment, if you're taking on too much, skipping recovery, not really giving voice to your fatigue, that can be eroding your integrity because it disconnects what you um, what you believe, that you are important, that your well-being matters, that your values, but it misaligns that what you believe from what you're doing. Because when you're neglecting your own sustainability by overextending yourself, it's a misalignment because in some ways, if you're taking on things that you have an ability not to take on, um, and the issue of boundaries, it's very context specific, um, but to the extent that you have influence and control, set those boundaries. It's important to set boundaries. There's another book I didn't put. Does anyone know that book, Set Boundaries, Find Happiness? Uh, anyway, I'll put that in a link somewhere. But that's another book that's helpful for resilience. Let's see. Yeah, be transparent about your capacity and your expectations. Act consistently with your core values. Um, yeah, model ethical steadiness. Protect your integrity. It's not about rigidity. It's about consistency. It means that you show up as your true self and whole self across a bunch of different domains. Now, okay, agency. This is the third anchor, and I'm gonna we're getting close to the time, so I'm gonna speed this up. You see, this is an impossible picture. This is a man holding up an elephant above his head. It's an impossible picture because, you know, we can't physically do that. I know a lot of people are doing things that are impossible or seem to be impossible, and you're overextending. So to the extent that you have and this also goes back to me, you know, I'm if I was this person, I was trying to change the justice system in certain places, and it was just impossible. I couldn't do it, but I thought that I could do it more than I actually could. Doesn't mean I wasn't effective in certain contexts, but you know, we have to really give some deep thought to, and there are tools out there about where you can just Google online about influence, spheres of influence and control. And you can engage in your own exercises about to kind of suss out what it is that you can really influence. And then once you establish that and those boundaries, then you can take meaningful steps. It helps to inform your actions. Um, right. All right. Restorative acts versus recovery. Recovery is the process of, say you've had finished a really big project and you are exhausted. Um, Recovery is when you kind of set aside some time to kind of recover from that, like larger sets of time, um, hours, days, even seasons. Restorative acts, they're kind of micro recoveries, small intentional practices that help you in real time. It could be 30 seconds, could be a couple of things we've done today, but they help to prevent chronic deletion. And we already did one of those restorative practices. And I've mentioned, these are a couple of other resilience practices, the 2-minute breath reset, step outside rule. There's studies out there about just, you walking outside, seeing nature, you know, those kinds of things can really help. Um, and this is a picture of some mountains and a lake. I'm going to move forward a little bit more. Resilience in teams, normalize reflection and recovery, encourage honesty and belonging, celebrate small wins. You know, it's important. Like, just don't be the boss you know, that's driving people down, right? Model vulnerability, cultivate belonging, encourage group reflection rituals, brief check-ins, recovery norms, gratitude rounds. Um, yeah, those kinds of things are important. All right. So I'm going to give you a couple quotes. This is Audre Lorde. I love this quote. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So, resilience is a form of resistance. So really take care of ourselves and our own capacity to keep doing the work, and find community, wherever you can. And because I've talked about John Lewis so much, this is John. This is me my young days. Don't get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. And this is, the subject of another webinar is cultivating hope as a muscle. Reflection and commitment. Um, what's one small thing that you can commit to this week? You know, just one small thing. Just, even if it's just this the let's see if I can figure out how to upload something. Yes, absolutely, Michelle. John and Audrey are still leading us. So what I'll send you is after this, I'll send you a link to just like this framework. I'll send you a document with the framework. I'll also send you a that 3-2-1 tool so you can use that. And if you can, if you're willing, if y'all could just put in, there's a short survey that Dr. Haynes just put a link to in the chat. And it helps me to figure out what's helpful because I just want to be helpful to folks. So if there are things that you think you'd like to hear more about or different topics, let me know and maybe we can as tap more DBAN resources, and we can all collaborate on maybe coming up with some um, other sessions to kind of help us to support each other. Community is so important. Um, it's so important. So, and thanks, Michelle. Meant that we're doing more deep breathing. Yeah, I did some deep breaths before this conversation, but yeah, we have to take care of each other. All right. Any other last comments or questions? I know it's late. We have 5 minutes, but does anyone want to lift up something that we should talk about in our 5 minutes? Please complete the survey. If uh, if I've mentioned any resources that you might want to follow up with me about, just email me here, journey@aberryconsulting.com, and I'll get those to you. And I'll let me see if I can find the link to that book now, the Nidra one about like boundaries. Set boundaries, find peace. For the claps, Alana. Good to hear from y'all. Folks I haven't seen in a long time. I hope all of y'all are doing well. Really do. And if there's any way I can help with anything, just let me know. All right. Chris, you want to make any closing comments or
Yeah, I just want to say that was fantastic and really, really timely. And just want to thank not only you, Wes, for your leadership, but also just the wisdom coming from the group chat and all of us being gathered together. This is just really an incredible experience. So this is what we're trying to do with D-Band, platforming our members to share the expertise and so much of the brilliance in the room. So please be on the lookout for future information about upcoming master classes. And once again, the survey link is in the chat, so please show some love to Wes and fill that survey out, and just if you can just like the react emoji for Wes as well, because we definitely appreciate his time and his expertise.
thanks y'all. Yeah. Thank you all for your participation and for making this possible. And thanks, Chris, for your leadership.